Thank you very much for joining us, Jane. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Jane Lloyd. I'm from Brighton, and I'm a TV producer.
And tell us, what did your parents do, and what did you want to be when you were a kid?
Well, my dad was a university lecturer, and my mum was. My mum did different things actually. She kind of had her own business selling like all the latest fashion. So she would go around all the village halls and kind of set up and sell to all the all the other mums and ladies of the area. So she did that, and I used to go and buy the clothes with her. We'd get in the car and drive up to the East End and go to all those wonderful clothing establishments, which no longer exist. Actually, they're all swanky flats now. And yeah, we'd go and buy loads of clothes, dresses, whatever, all the latest stuff, and then come back. And then she'd go out in the evenings and set up somewhere and sell it. So she's sort of like a mobile clothes shop, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of quite 70s, wasn't it, really? It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like an online, like probably now that's an online. So yeah, so she kind of did that, and then she went to work in a bank, I think, as a cashier, actually, eventually, when she gave that up. But so yeah, that's my parents.
So, what did you want to do? Did you want to follow in her footsteps, or what were your early interests?
Well, I was very much into drama, so I was, sort of wanted to be an actress. I did, I did sort of amateur theatre groups. I did my drama exams. I sort of entered the Brighton, drama festival and won the junior championship one year. So I was really quite into it. And then I got a place at 16 to go to study, like doing a sort of performing arts foundation course. So I left Brighton and used to go to Lewis College, where they did that, and did 2 years there, where it was really, I think in those days, a lot of sort of schools, comprehensive schools, didn't do a lot of drama, or like as a GCSE really. So you sort of had to go somewhere else. So this place did like GCSE drama, dance, theatre design. So I sort of did a 2 year course in that, where I got the GCSEs and A levels. I did A level theatre studies, and I did my A level English as well in the evenings, to try and get more A levels, basically, so I could go to university if I wanted to. So yeah, I did that, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. Just leaving school was probably like the best thing I could have done, and going somewhere where I was amongst like-minded people that were into theatre and drama, which is what I really wanted to do, you know. So yeah, so I did that.
So, Jen, I mean, it's fascinating. Obviously, that our sort of origin stories always, and I guess full circle. That's where you've ended up, right? You're producing, and do you feel that you're still influenced by those early exposures to performance?
I think definitely. I just think because you sort of end up surrounded by people who, they're different characters, they're different personalities, people that want to go into performing arts, or, whether it's in front of the camera, behind the camera, as a dancer, an actor. And I think that's, for me, then going into doing TV work was, yeah, I felt very much at home. I guess I, enjoyed those kind of people and personalities that end up in that business. There's definitely a sort of thread there. But I think, yeah, definitely, like when you're casting and working with actors, I think, having done it, having sort of stood on stage and done that, I mean, only sort of amateurishly as a teenager, but, you definitely can still understand what they're going through when they're working on those parts.
So chronologically, you studied English and drama
Yeah,
at, and I'm obliged to say this because it's written down, one of the finest universities in the world, and
certainly
then
is.
became a TFL teacher. Um, how did that switch into TV come about from being TEFL into
Um,
moving into TV?
I think I was a little bit unsure about what I wanted to do when I graduated. So I sort of went home and did various different things. And, TEFL was great. I mean, I loved it. I love teaching. I think, there's an element to that where you're sort of performing, you're sort of on a stage, you're kind of, there's something that worked for me being a teacher as well. And yeah, so then from there, I think I decided to I'd moved back home to Brighton, and then I moved back up to London. And to be honest, I didn't kind of go, oh, I want to be a TV producer. I actually didn't really know that business exists. I didn't know how to get into that industry. It wasn't like I kind of, had gone through any kind of exposure to it before. I just didn't know what it was. And then I ended up doing some temping in London and met a girl who I got on very well with, who said, you would really love working at this edit house. My husband or boyfriend or whatever is an editor there. So, and they're always looking for runners. I think I was about 25 or something, at this point. And so, so I, went and met this wonderful editor called Cyril Metzger, and he gave me a job as a runner. So I went in there, and that was my entry into the industry. Because I think once you kind of get into the industry, you're in that family, and you kind of meet people. And I think if you've got the right attitude, and you can, I don't know, you can get on basically. So that's what happened.
Okay. And you mentioned Cyril, but were there any other people who helped you or inspired you at the start of that journey?
I mean, honestly, all the people I worked with, they were all so talented. It was so strange coming in from like pretty much, well, I was working at the Business Design Centre, temping, and I think it was still quite corporate and officey. And I think suddenly going into this environment where there were people really creative, they'd go to the pub at lunchtime and not come back, and it wasn't an issue. It was quite free and fun. And, you were always, and there was loads of companies in Soho, and you felt right in the center of it all. And, this was the 90s, advertising was still running high, and filmmaking in general, because, of course, the editing house was still, we had big film directors coming in, working, with the editors on the commercials they'd filmed. So it felt, you felt very part of something. And I think all the people around me inspired me, really. Cyril, Pam Powers, who owned the editing house, who was Ridley Scott's editor. She was amazing. All these incredible characters who just, they just took you for who you are. It was like you could be a quirky, different person, but you'd be given the opportunity if you kind of had the right attitude and you had some talent. They would support that. So it was great. I loved it. I earned no money though. I mean, I lived off my credit card. It was a pretty lowly paid job.
Still paying it off.
Yes, pretty much.
Just thinking back actually to that period of time, and you said, advertising was very much at its peak. Do you remember Tony Kaye?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Did you ever meet him?
I did meet him. He had a film company. Tony Kaye. Yeah, he had a film company of his own, and I never worked.
Who's Tony Kaye?
He's a director.
Right.
So he was a director. He came from advertising and had been, I think, the sort of enfant terrible,
yes,
if I can say that,
yeah,
of the advertising production world. And he made a film called American History X with Ed Norton.
Yeah.
Martin, do you remember it?
Yeah.
So that was him. But I think he then, I don't know quite what happened, but he then took he took his name off the film, and was, I think, then vanished. I think it was a bit spinal.
Yeah. It was funny because I think because I eventually ended up at a company called Tomboy Films. When I left the film editing house, I sort of decided editing wasn't for me. I'm going into production, and managed to get a great job and a great opportunity there. So, and that company, Tomboy Films, and I think it was Tony Kaye Films or something, I can't remember the name, but they were the powerhouses in the 90s of sort of film and TV commercials and music videos. So there was a lot of connection with Tony Kaye, and all the directors knew him and the producers. And there were so many stories from his shoots that were just so 90s, it was just like, wasting money. I think he did an Evian commercial with something like 300 babies. He wouldn't like shoot them all separately. He insisted on having them all sat in this cinema and they were all supposed to cry. It was a very famous advert from the 90s, actually, for Evian he did. And I just remember the stories from that shoot were just like, oh my God, it just sounds so stressful. But they were like, so I think you're always around these characters that just were legends, really, and just, were incredible filmmakers, but just would never bend. It was like, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And, it was, it was just sort of what you accepted at that time. They had they were sort of the god, really, the directors.
So thinking a little bit about the basics of the job, could you tell us what a producer does, typically what your day looks like, and how that differs from the exec producer's role?
What is my job? I mean, I think, a producer is someone that can basically get a script and interpret that script to become a film. So they can look at that script and understand, what equipment they might need, what sort of casting they need to do, what sort of level of crew or, production designer, director of photography, they can kind of take that project and then work with the director who comes up with a creative treatment. And then together I will put a budget together. That's the main thing a producer does, actually. And then they end up shaping the film with the director, really. And I think, as a producer, you have to be quite versatile because every situation is different and every person you work is different. So you end up sort of sometimes you work with a director who might need more help with a storyboard or, just more suggestions with locations or something. And then other times you work with someone who's, very experienced, maybe quite a well-known director who your role becomes quite different. You're sort of almost just managing them rather than, they know what they want. They know who to pull in for that role. They know what actor to cast. They know who wants to be a production designer for them. It just, you're constantly kind of evolving into every job and reacting really to that project because it's never the same. No two job is ever the same that I do, really. And an exec producer is, what does an exec producer do? I guess they oversee the creative and they often are sort of full-time at a production company and they're kind of have sometimes a sales background. So they might bring the project in and in the early days, they'll write the treatment with the director. And then they'll stay across the job looking after the clients or ad agency if it's a commercial project.
How does it work? Does the director employ you, or the client employs the director and a producer?
Yeah, the client basically goes for a director. They will put a script together and say that director there will be great for that. And then, that director will be signed to a production company where I will work, or even as a freelancer, I work a lot, or they know me, or the director might have worked with me before. So you end up working, and quite often you won't have met the director before and he won't have known you, but he'll, like, his exec producer might say, oh, Jane's great or so-and-so's great, and then you come in. And I think so that's generally how it works. I mean, some directors do have one producer they work with all the time, and that, and I think certainly going back to those early, I don't know, 90s days, those big directors had their own producers that like Ridley Scott, or, is a famous advertising director, or Tony Kaye, or any of these guys, they would have their own producer who then probably started their own production company, like RSA, which is Ridley's company, which is still going. And, there's lots of other companies that were started by a director, who was from that era and who was a film director.
Yeah. So that was the kind of route then, wasn't it, into film? Often that a lot of currently famous film directors started off making ads in the 80s and
Yeah,
90s.
absolutely, and still do, to be honest.
Was that something is that the end of your trajectory? You're going to end up making feature films?
I think, feature films, I'd love to have done more feature films, but I think you sort of make a decision at some point to do commercials or step into feature films, and it's a very different life for a producer, I think. The skill set is the same, really. Actually, I think commercials and feature films have the same crew, really, because the cost, you're sort of working at a certain level where people are paid well, whereas sort of TV traditionally used to sort of be slightly less. So, all the crew I work with, they come from features, they've been doing a big Marvel film or this or that, and they're doing ads, and it's the same for directors. Of course, now it's the streaming services like Netflix or, Apple or whatever. So that obviously has changed a lot in the last 10 years. But yeah, a lot of the early directors, they were all doing ads, and honestly, they still do. You'll still get a script for, I recently pitched a job with Nicholas Winding Refn, who's a well-known film director. So these guys will step in and do commercials, if it's the right project.
When we talked to, I think episode 14, the VFX editor, he was very discreet in that he only named the directors who were really nice, and he mentioned Ridley Scott in there. I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you tell us some of the nice ones that you've worked with, people who've been you've enjoyed working with?
I've worked with Asif Kapadia a few years ago, who is an amazing documentary filmmaker. Did Amy and Senna, of course. So he was. I enjoyed him. His process of working was just wonderful. He's very kind, very creative, very collaborative. So that was, and yeah, he was great. Real London guy. He was great. I love working with him. The project itself was a bit of a challenge, but I think he was great. I've worked with lots of amazing directors, and not all of them are big feature film guys. There's still so much talent around, really. It's, there really are a lot of talented people.
Well, tell us about some enjoyable experiences you've done an amazing range of adverts and productions and things. What have been some of the more exciting or memorable things you've worked on?
I think, there's been a wide range of things, really. I've done it for a long time, and I think I did a bank spitter commercial. I was a production manager then, actually. That's the job you have before being a producer. So I was a production manager, and we went to Dublin, and we were shooting Roger Moore, the late Roger Moore, in this TV commercial, and it was supposed to be top secret, so in other words, no press, you have to sort of use code names, and the whole project has a code. No one knows what's happening. And I remember going to meet him in this hotel in Dublin, him and his lovely wife, to sort of escort them to set, really. And, it was supposed to, this was a really hush. No one knew we were there. And it was this very elegant hotel in Dublin. And I turned up in reception. And there was a lot of people around with like photographers and stuff. I was thinking, what on earth's going on? They've rumbled us. This is awful. Anyway, if someone said, "Oh, Roger's coming down the lift," I was like, "Oh, this is just so stressful." I didn't need this to happen. Anyway, it turns out that the Irish rugby team were there as well, staying there, and they were doing a press conference in reception. So of course there was literally just like wall-to-wall press by the time he came down, and they were all there, these rugby guys, and there was all these photographers all like asking them questions, had their cameras out. And I walked across the sort of foyer with Roger Moore, and then someone went, "Oi, it's Roger!" They all swung their lenses around off the rugby guys, who were all like, "What?" There was just this photo in the paper the next day of me like this, walking along with Roger Moore behind, like, "Hi," totally rumbled. But it was just like, you couldn't have made it up, when you're trying to be discreet, and it's like, there is actually a press conference.
Massive fail.
Yeah, I felt quite bad about that, but anyway.
Yeah. And tell us a bit more about Roger Moore then. What was he as he appeared?
Yes. That's, I think whenever you work with that level of talent and star, they are just incredible, and they don't need to do 1,000 takes. They know exactly where to walk. They know exactly where to stand. They understand the way you light, film, which at the time we were all shooting on 35mm film then. And, they would be able to, they wouldn't need, like, you wouldn't be there forever doing take after take. They were just such a pro, really. and just did it every time. You'd get like 3 takes. You'd be like, should we move on then? Because like he's already done it. So yeah, I mean, he was just wonderful, really. I mean, it was just chatty to everyone, very down to earth. I mean, actually, we went out for dinner in this restaurant in Dublin with him, and we sat upstairs. I always remember going upstairs. They had this big sort of balcony area, and then downstairs there was another sort of section of tables. And we went upstairs, and we were having dinner with his wife and the director and myself and the producer. And downstairs, having food down in the main restaurant was U2 and The Coors. And it was like, and they started like singing, like, doing the whole James Bond theme tune, standing up. They were already drunk. And it was just like, I remember thinking, oh, so embarrassing. And I think as a young production manager then, really, I sort of found the whole thing a bit like, oh my God, but I think those memories really from those jobs, when you have those experiences, are things that make me smile a lot now.
Pipe down, you two.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Roger Moore's trying to eat his soup.
Exactly. But yeah, no, he was a legend. And I think, there's been, a few times over the years where, a lot of footballers, a lot of sports people, David Beckham, I mean, every British footballer you can think of, Ryan Giggs. I mean, I've done Alan Shearer, on a train in Newcastle. That was fun. I mean, that was really the sort of advertising in those days, I think, was, people really invested in those ideas, brands really invested. And, there was a lot more work being made of that sort of quality. And, it's definitely changed in the last 10 years. But yeah. And then, I mean, other great experiences, I think going to Tokyo for an H&M job and shooting Noemi Campbell, walking around Tokyo was interesting, because you can imagine how mobbed, you get in Tokyo trying to shoot with top models like that, So that was an amazing project. I mean, just being in Tokyo and working in Japan is just fantastic for any filmmaker. I mean, it's just incredible place to work, But that job was amazing.
Working with top models like Naomi Campbell and footballers like David Beckham.
Yeah.
And fantastic acting talent like Roger Moore. Do they provide different challenges?
Yeah, I think so. I think that what I've learned in general about anyone like that you're working with is that they are all really lovely people. Honestly, it's the people around them that are very stressful, and that's the pressure. So, their team or their management or their wife or husband or whatever, there's always that side, which is more challenging for a production. Because they want to justify their role in it, really, and make sure their talent's looked after. So there's always like a rider comes with booking a sort of famous person, which is when they send you their list of requirements. It could be like a chef or this, or a private toilet. So the rider is always a fun thing to look at as a producer. Wonder if you've got enough money to pay for it all.
Yeah. So can you recall any particularly ludicrous or interesting demands from riders?
Usually some crazy food. If you're working with models, there's usually some crazy food requests, or I'm only eating seaweed this week, and a chef has to come in to prepare that or something. Yeah, I mean, things like the beauty team, the driver, the chauffeur, security. So I think, but then you've also worked with brands that can be very demanding, that have their own sort of set of rules around working with them, like especially the technology brands, like the mobile phone people, not saying any names, but yeah, they, they can be quite challenging. Well, I think there's a lot of secrecy around their products. So if you're launching a new phone, it's like that phone can basically come over on a private jet surrounded by like 3 security people, if it is the prototype, because there's so much secrecy around that product.
So can you think of a shoot where you've been very pleasantly surprised by someone who you had reputationally low expectations of, but actually they'd come on and they were an absolute sweetheart?
I mean, I would say Naomi Campbell was probably one of them, to be honest, because she has a bit of a reputation of being quite difficult, but actually she was lovely. You know, by the time, I mean,
Yeah.
it's always the sort of stuff around them, but when they're on set, you know, she had to sing, it was a Wham song and it was a karaoke sort of film. And she basically had to, all the models were lip syncing this Wham track. And I was thinking, oh, is she going to know the words? Is she going to need us to have like a thing, like an auto cue? You know, she knew all the words. She was so into it. She even gave us extra shots. You know, she stayed later than we thought. You know, like it was, and that surprised me. You know, it was.
Yeah.
So you do. I think it's sort of back to that thing when, honestly, when you are working with those people that just, you know, are mega and earn mega money, you know, they are really mega for that reason, because they are so good at what they do. And they're very professional, actually, when it comes to it. I think it's the actors in the middle ground that are actually harder. You know, the ones that have been in soaps or this, that, and the other, and then come in to do commercials. They're the ones that are late and they don't come back, or they get drunk and they, you know, they don't make their call times, you know. So that's been my experience, is that's always a bit harder. But I think the footballers, the big models, the pop stars, you know, they're always pretty professional, really.
No, I bet. Thinking about mishaps, stroke disasters, is there one or more situations you've been in where you thought, oh my God, this couldn't have gone worse? And what happened?
I've lost cameras. You know, I've drowned a few cameras. I was going down a mountain in Portugal a couple of years ago with a very expensive piece of equipment called a Ukraine arm, which is basically a robotic camera, which has this arm that basically films cars, and it can drive really fast. It can kind of go wrap around the car as a camera, and they use it in all the big car ads. It's very expensive. And we were in this very remote area of Portugal shooting at the top of this mountain, and they were going down this mountain really fast. And the operator just forgot to lift the arm, and the whole camera and the arm just literally smashed off and flew down the mountain. So, you know, I sort of came onto set and there was like just smashed camera everywhere. You know, it's like the camera's gone. The arm was just like this broken sort of thing without a head to it. And you just think, oh my God, you know, sorry, the insurance claim.
What happens in that situation, though? Do you just have to wait for another Ukraine camera to show
back?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that those, you know, when you work with that sort of equipment, there's only like 4 in Europe, you know, so it's like you've got the only one, and that's already come from Holland, you know, and you're in Portugal. So, and you're in the middle of nowhere, really, because you're not near a city where there's a sort of resources or film supplies. So yeah, I mean, you have to just phone the insurance company. And I think, you know, for any producer, that's another part of your job, is to be accountable and to get interviewed and explain what happened and make sure that everyone was briefed properly. And, you know, it's pretty painful. But, you know, if no one's hurt, then it's all good. But it's just money. It's just time and money, right? Because you've then got to stand your film crew down, sit around while you wait for another camera to come from Lisbon or Madrid or wherever, you know. So we ended up continuing. We managed to get a replacement equipment and continue the next day. But yeah, so there's been stuff like that that's happened.
Your website mentions award-winning.
Oh,
so
sorry about that. I'm freelance, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess in advertising they have, you know, we have awards for the best sort of TV campaign. So I've produced a few ads over the years that have won gold in advertising, which is like, I did a campaign for Amazon Prime about 4 years ago that won the best campaign. I made a job for Canon cameras that won silver. I did a commercial for Macmillan Cancer a few years back, which won a lot of awards. So yeah, so those that's basically the award-winning in my industry. No Oscars, but the sort of equivalent in advertising, maybe.
And are they enjoyable, those nights out? Do you like all that?
They Oh, I think it's always a good chance to kind of have a good chat with other producers, because I think when you're freelance, you tend to be just sort of working on your own and going into different companies. And, you, of course, you know people over the years and you meet people at companies, but you go to those events and you can, everyone's in the same room, and that's quite unusual. And it's just so much fun to sort of see what everyone's up to and have a chat, and just, yeah, it's really a good laugh, actually.
What was the first ad or big project that you were in total? It was totally your responsibility, and what was that like?
That was probably when I was at Tomboy Films, which was my first job in production. I have a feeling it might have been a Tango commercial, which
Not the Tango commercial.
do you know, it was probably about a year after, so it was the same creative team.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't that one of the guy. You mean the one boxing on the cliff top?
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, no, that was that one too, wasn't it? No, well, originally there was
Yeah.
You've Been Tangoed, where they slapped a guy around the face on
Yes.
the train station, and then
Yeah.
of course, I'd forgotten
Yeah.
about that one, the one with the Harrier jets on the cliffs of Dover and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was around the same time. It was probably like a year after, and it was a similar campaign of
Wow.
crazy things happening. And yeah, I mean, I did a Tango commercial with I think it's with a director called Declan Lowney, who was he's a wonderful director. He did like Father Ted, Cold Feet. He's a very good comedy director. And he did ads, and he was one of the directors on the roster. We got on really well, and I think that was probably my first producing gig. Was doing that with him, and I think we might have done a few together. And they were sort of Tango or McVitie's Jaffa Cakes. It was kind of funny. It was kind of like a golden age of advertising then. Really, I don't know if that's just because I was in my 20s and I think it was amazing, but I don't know. Those scripts were just great.
And what's changed? Do you think it's become inherently more conservative?
Definitely. I think there's a number of things. I mean, obviously technology's changed. We make things differently now. Everything's digital. So the craft of filmmaking has changed. I think, obviously, the obvious things, smartphones, internet, brands don't invest so much in TV advertising, so they're not so invested in it maybe, and there's not as many ads made. But also I think advertising kind of became quite global. So you end up making a film for everyone instead of making a film just for the UK. So in those days you would make a script and, there's all those things that make it funny for anyone living in the UK really. And I think now brands, they want to make an ad that's going to be on air in France and Germany and America or Canada. And so you kind of lose those nuances of humor or sort of any sort of cultural identity there, I think, which it's not it's not as much fun. There's not as many of those certainly good comedy scripts around.
You can see that sometimes, can't you? That kind of Euro bland. It's an advert.
Yeah.
It doesn't really look like anyone in any particular country.
Yeah.
It's just sort of
exactly. It's like yeah, and that's often the brief. It's like we need to cast someone who in 7 different countries they'll understand and will relate to, and then the script and the lines are written for everyone, but it's great fun working on global ads, and I love doing those big, Nike ads or whatever, but I think those ones actually do translate, because I think, all the teenagers around the world are quite similar. They're all on their phones watching TikTok, and, that's half the time who you're selling to is a sort of quite a younger audience, really. But I think the sort of days of those sort of very British ads, brands that were like Tango or Jaffa, they were very, very much targeted to a UK audience.
Leonard Ross tipping his drink down.
Yeah,
Joan Collins.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I remember doing ads for like the AA, which were just so funny, just little stories about, I mean, they're like little films, doing ads like those, they really are like little films. And, you're casting an ensemble of people, you're working with really highly skilled technicians that can come in and light it and tell a story in 30 seconds. I mean, that is really difficult. That really does take a skill, and it's not for everyone. Not every director can be an advertising director, That's is a real skill.
And would you say, I mean, would British advertising creatives in that period be amongst the best in the world? I mean, was that sort of
Definitely.
creativity
Yeah.
given extra, right?
100%. I think, I think we were really known for being the best in the world. And I think we still are to some extent, but I think the American agencies have sort of taken that over with their humor now and their ads. But I think that's also partly because they make things for America. So, that sort of, they can really push it out there and be bold with their ideas. And because, it's all about committing to a good idea. As soon as you start to sort of wash it down for like 7 different places, the idea isn't as good. You have to sort of be brave and commit to good ideas. And I think any brand that can do that, and there are still some doing that, then, it's great. It's a good ad. But I think English advertising is still up there, but I do, it's not like it was certainly in that period, I don't think.
So if you were starting out all over again, what would the 2024 Jane tell the 1997 Jane to do differently? Or no regrets?
I don't know. I don't think I want to live with regrets, but I think that I think I met a lot of amazing people in my early years, actually in my 20s, who I probably didn't sort of stay in touch with, and I sort of should have done, because I think, one thing about production, it is sort of about connections, actually, and because you're making things happen as a producer, it's such a big part of it. And I think certainly at Tomboy Films, there were so many kind of incredible producers that had sort of shared office space with us, and they were, Duncan Kenworthy, he was the original Four Weddings and a Funeral producer, so those sort of people that were just knocking around, that I used to sort of, as a 26, 7-year-old, I didn't really think about, and, they'd ask you to go and hang out, and you'd be like, oh no, I'm busy, I'm going to, and I sort of look back and think, oh God, that I should have chatted to those guys a bit more, or,
Yeah.
But that's just being young, isn't it? I think,
Yeah,
and sort of
I know
just.
I know exactly what you mean. I feel, I lost touch with too many great people in my 20s because I was an idiot.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. And you're right. And I think that's part of, probably would be my one thing to say, is I wish I'd sort of, valued those connections I had a bit more.
Well, you've worked on some massive music videos too.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about those?
Yeah, I did a job last year with Taylor Swift. I did her I Can See You music video, I think it's called, which was amazing opportunity. And it was such a massive production, and I had such an incredible team with me. And just the whole thing was just a wonderful experience, really. When you're working with those kind of stars, it's just incredible. And and she was wonderful, and very down to earth, and really quite easy in that sense. So the production itself was tricky, that was difficult, working on location with big stars coming in, and lots of stunts, and just crazy stuff, really. But that we filmed in Liverpool. Yeah, so it was shot on location, which is always a challenge, of course, when you're dealing with very famous people, and that level of privacy, security, whatever. So, but it was great, and I loved it. And I've done a music video with Madonna, which was also an incredible experience. She was fun. We went and had we shot in Lisbon because that's where she was based. And myself and the director and the EP on the project went and met her. She wanted to meet us before the shoot to have a cup of tea. So we sort of flew to Lisbon and went to meet her. And she's a big horse rider. So we met her at her stables, and she wanted to go for a canter along the sands and sort of have a chat. But of course, none of us could ride a horse. So rather embarrassingly, had to follow along in a golf buggy as she cantered along the sands. And then went and had tea with her, which was very nice. But she's a very smart lady. And actually, you sort of realize when, of course, she's an incredible artist, but she's also a director and has been a producer. So she really understands filmmaking and really owns that. So it's not like sitting there and kind of telling someone how you should do something. She's making suggestions, or she understands the setups and what's the quickest way to get a shot. And, so it was quite collaborative in that sense. And she really wants to be part of that and sort of own the process as much as she's sort of in front of the camera. She's also kind of having a big opinion about what's going on around, how it's made, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, an amazing and incredible experience, and hard work. Oh my goodness, like no sleep.
So how long would those two take? How long did the Taylor Swift one take and the Madonna one?
Well, that took a few months.
Wow.
That video,
One
just
song.
yeah, because it was, I mean, it's like a little feature film, really, her project. So, they're very involved. So there's lots of set building, locations and things like that. So, that takes a few months. All the pre-production, just there's a lot goes into it. I mean, that's nothing compared to a feature film. I mean, the prep on those is really long. This is just to sort of set up permissions to go places and close roads. It takes a while. I think the one in Lisbon, we didn't have quite so long on that. The one with Madonna. That wasn't quite so long.
Do you enjoy all the sort of travel and stuff? I mean, you presumably then you spent a few months living in Liverpool and some time spent living in Portugal for those two. And
yeah.
Does it get tiresome after a while living in a hotel, or is it?
I do enjoy it, and I think I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to do that. Of course, living out of a hotel room loses its appeal quite quickly because you just want to cook your own food and be in your own space. But I think the one thing about commercials is honestly not that. So I've got quite a short attention span, so commercials are quite good for me, really, because it is really a 6-7 week thing on any commercial. So if you do go away, it's 2 or 3 weeks, maybe at the most. And sometimes you can come back in between if it's a European shoot. So I kind of used to it now, if I'm honest. And actually, if I don't go away, I feel I can get a bit fed up and think, oh, actually, I really need to go to Spain, or I really need to go to Eastern Europe, or wherever I'm filming, So, but I've definitely seen some countries that I would probably never have gone as a tourist, which I think is incredible to have had that in my working life, actually.
So which ones stand out in that category? Places you would probably not have been otherwise?
I would say Ukraine, which is a huge, or sadly was a huge filming place for everyone. Shot many commercials there, probably like 10 or 11 over the years, and spent a lot of time there. So that was is an incredible country. And the people there are just wonderful. They're so skilled. The technicians, actually, huge film studios there. It's just incredible. It's so sad to think they're not. They're all sort of, disappeared to work in other countries now. Those guys, but yeah, very talented people. And then, I mean, in places like Lithuania, Serbia, Bulgaria. I mean, I probably wouldn't necessarily have gone there as for a holiday, but they're just. They're all sort of film centers, and, they're all, I mean, Bulgaria has this incredible standing sets of New York. So you go there because they've actually built New York. So
Really?
If you can't afford to go to New York, you go to Bulgaria and you have you shoot, you've literally got like a sort of New York street, and then you look up and there's just like mountains, where it's sort of, in the countryside of Bulgaria. It's quite strange.
Wow.
So you go there and you just, you set up your shoot. And I think if you're doing like stunts or sort of crazy SFX, which is what we were doing, it worked really well because you've just got control. You walk in, it's not like you're shutting down streets in New York. It's perfect.
That's amazing. Is it Bulgaria maybe, or maybe Romania, where they built quite a massive thing for plebs? That silly comedy on the.
Yes, it's Bulgaria. They've got Rome there. So in Bulgaria, they've got Rome, they've got Mexico, they've got Paris, they've got, and actually a few countries around the world where they have these standing sets. I think there's one in Hungary as well.
Amazing.
So yeah, that's probably the most exciting thing about the job in many ways is finding these locations, looking which country we're going to shoot this in, and
Yeah.
where can facilitate us, where's got the best locations or the best actors or the best technicians, or and it's sort of part of the process as a producer that you have to shape in a way.
Brilliant. Jane, thank you ever so much. I'll stop there and let you get on with your day, because I could
Oh, thank you.
could talk to you all day, but I'm sure you've got things to do.